The greatest exploration in human history happened without a single map or compass, long before European ships sailed with sextants and charts. A different kind of navigator was mastering the largest ocean on Earth. The Polynesian voyagers settled a triangle of islands so vast it could swallow every continent combined, and they did it using only the stars, the waves, and the songs they carried in their memory. This is the story of their science, a complete system of wayfinding that turns the open sea into a familiar highway. By the end, you will understand how to read the ocean itself, as they did, unlocking a form of intelligence we have nearly forgotten. How did they hold a course across thousands of miles of empty blue? And why did this profound knowledge almost vanish? What does it mean to carry a map not on paper, but in your mind? To grasp their achievement, you must first understand the stage on which they performed. The Pacific Ocean is not merely large, it is an entity of almost incomprehensible scale. If you placed every continent side by side, they would all fit comfortably within its borders, with room left for another Asia. This is the arena. Now picture the targets. Scattered across this liquid expanse are thousands of islands, from towering volcanic peaks to fragile coral atolls, some no larger than a city park. The distances between them are not measured in convenient day trips. We are talking voyages of thousands of miles across a horizon that offers nothing but more horizon. For a European sailor with a compass and a map, such a journey would be a monumental test of endurance and luck. But the Polynesian voyagers possessed none of those tools. No magnetic needle to point north, no sextant to measure the sun's angle, no parchment charts unfurled on a captain's table, and critically, they had no written language. There were no logbooks, no written star tables, no lists of coordinates to consult. Every piece of knowledge, every route, every subtle sign from the sea had to be carried perfectly in the human mind and passed from one generation to the next through memory, through story, through song. This fact transforms the entire endeavor. What we are looking at is not a story of people accidentally drifting on currents and washing up on new shores, though that may have happened occasionally. This is a story of deliberate, repeatable exploration. They set out into the blue unknown not as castaways but as pioneers. They found new lands, settled them, and then, most astonishingly, they found their way back home to share the news. And then they did it again and again, navigating the greatest wilderness on Earth by a science written not on paper, but in the patterns of the world around them. So how do you build a reliable navigation system from memory and observation alone? The answer begins not with looking down at a map, but by looking up. This knowledge was almost lost to history. For generations after European contact, the true scale of Polynesian exploration was dismissed as impossible, the stories of star paths and wave patterns fading into legend. But this was not a myth waiting to be forgotten. It was a science waiting to be remembered. In the 1970s, a profound experiment was launched, one that would transform speculation into undeniable proof. A traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe named Hōkūleʻa was built using ancestral designs without a single metal nail, relying on lashings and timber. Its mission was not to reenact history, but to reactivate it. Could such a vessel, guided only by the methods of the ancestors, successfully sail from Hawaii to Tahiti, a journey of over 2,000 miles across open ocean? The man who took up that challenge was a navigator named Nainoa Thompson. He had no written manuals, only fragments of knowledge passed down, and the mentorship of the last surviving master navigators from Micronesia. In 1976, watching the North Star disappear behind him as he sailed south, Nainoa put the ancient science to the ultimate test. When Hōkūleʻa made landfall in Tahiti after 30 days at sea, greeted by thousands of cheering islanders, it did more than complete a voyage. It proved that the star compass and the reading of the sea were not poetic metaphors. They were a precise, reliable, and breathtakingly elegant technology of the mind. This modern revival means everything we are about to explore is not theoretical. It is a living, practiced tradition. The star paths we will trace, the wave patterns we will learn to see, they are the same ones Nainoa Thompson used to find an island a pinprick in the ocean. This changes the story from one about what people might have done long ago to understanding how they actually did it and how some still do it today. So let us step onto the deck of that canoe under a sky ablaze with stars and begin with the first and most constant guide, the celestial map that never fades. The night sky over the open Pacific is not a random scattering of lights. To a master navigator, it is a vast, rotating dome etched with precise pathways, a celestial map where every star is a landmark. Their primary tool for reading this map is called the star compass, a mental construct of breathtaking simplicity and power. Forget the physical compass with its spinning needle pointing to magnetic north. This is a grid of direction etched into memory, built from the very architecture of the heavens. The navigator begins by dividing the entire circle of the horizon around the canoe into 32 segments, like slices of a pie. Each of these segments is called a house, and each house is permanently anchored, not by a vague sense of east or west, but by the exact point where a specific, bright star or constellation rises from the ocean or sinks below it. Think of it this way. If you know that the brilliant star Sirius always rises in one particular house, and the constellation Orion's belt sets in another, you have just created two fixed posts in the sky. You have built a reference frame. As the night progresses and the Earth turns, the stars appear to march across the sky, each one following its own predictable arc from its rising house to its setting house. But the houses themselves do not move. They are fixed to the horizon relative to your canoe. So, at any moment of the night, by glancing at where a known star sits in relation to these mental houses, the navigator can instantly determine direction. Is that star just entering its rising house? Then you are looking east. Has it climbed halfway to the zenith? Then you have been sailing on a steady course. This turns the dynamic, wheeling sky into a stable grid. One of the most famous guiding lights is the Southern Cross. In the vast emptiness of the Southern Pacific, this distinctive constellation does not point to true south like a simple arrow. Instead, its long axis and the two bright pointer stars beside it are memorized within specific houses. Their movement through those houses tells the navigator not just south, but the precise orientation of their vessel. The genius of this system is that it requires no instruments, only disciplined observation and flawless memory. The navigator must know hundreds of stars and their pathways, holding this rotating dome in their mind through cloudy nights and long days when the stars are absent. It is a living database constantly updated by a glance upward. But what happens when the stars vanish behind the clouds or when the sun dominates the sky? The navigator's map does not disappear. It simply shifts from reading the heavens to reading the rhythms of the sea itself. But the star compass is only half of the map. When clouds veil the sky or the sun bleaches the heavens into a featureless blue dome, the navigator does not panic. They simply lower their gaze because the ocean itself holds its own constant rhythm, a deep, rolling pulse that can guide you as surely as any star. This is the art of reading the swell, the dominant, long-distance waves generated by distant weather systems and steady trade winds. While surface waves chop and change with the local breeze, these underlying swells are the ocean's true highways, flowing in consistent, powerful directions for thousands of miles. A master navigator learns to feel these swells through their entire body. Lying in the hull of the canoe, They can sense the deep, regular roll as the vessel rises and falls on these immense underwater mountains. Each primary swell direction is memorized, given a name, and woven into the mental map. One swell might come consistently from the northeast, another from the southeast. By aligning the canoe so these swells strike the hull at a specific, remembered angle, the navigator can hold a course with their eyes closed. It is like walking down a familiar, pitch-black hallway by trailing your hand along the wall. You are not seeing the path, you are feeling its constant, reassuring presence. The training to master this is profound. Apprentices spend countless hours in canoes or even lying in the shallows near shore, learning to distinguish the dominant swell from the chaotic chatter of local waves and wind chop. They learn to detect the slightest variation in the rhythm, a faint shudder or a change in the timing between rolls. That subtle shift is a critical warning. It might mean the canoe has drifted off course, caught by a current, and the angle of the swell is now wrong. Or, more thrillingly, it could signal the first hint of land. As a swell approaches an island, its deep energy interacts with the rising seafloor. It bends, it refracts, creating a secondary pattern, a new interference in the ocean's steady heartbeat. To the untrained body, it feels like nothing. To the navigator, it is a whisper from the island itself, a ghostly echo saying, "I am here." This skill transforms the open ocean from a trackless void into a textured, living landscape. The navigator is not lost in a featureless blue, but is instead constantly feeling their way along these great, rolling pathways, their course confirmed by the ancient, reliable pulse of the sea. Yet, even with the stars above and the swells below, the journey is not over. The final clues to finding land come not from the grand movements of heaven and ocean, but from the smallest signs of life carried on the wind. When dawn breaks and the stars vanish, the navigator's primary guide becomes the sun. Its path is not a vague ball of light, but a precise daily marker for east and west. Unlike the star compass, which relies on many points, the sun's movement provides a simpler yet critical axis of orientation. A master navigator knows that the sun does not rise and set in the exact same spot every single day. Over the course of a year, its rising point along the horizon marches slowly north and south with the seasons. This entire annual path, from its most northern summer solstice rise to its most southern winter solstice rise, is memorized and integrated into the mental houses of the star compass. So on any given morning, by observing exactly which house the sun emerges from, the navigator knows not only due east but also the general time of year. This solar knowledge turns a single event into a calendar and a compass combined. Holding a course under the blazing midday sun requires a different kind of observation. With no horizon stars to reference, the navigator relies on the sun's arc and, remarkably, the pattern of glare on the water. They track the sun's progression across the sky, understanding its angle and estimating the time of day by its height. This internal sense of time is crucial for dead reckoning, the process of calculating position based on speed, time, and direction traveled. But there is a more immediate physical clue. The sun's reflection on the ocean's surface creates a distinct glitter pattern, a path of light that stretches toward the horizon. When the canoe is perfectly aligned with the dominant swell, this glitter path will form a straight, unbroken line ahead and behind the vessel. If the canoe drifts off course even slightly, the line will appear to bend or shift. By constantly checking this alignment of light on water against the felt direction of the swell, the navigator can make tiny corrections, keeping the canoe on its invisible highway even under the featureless dome of day. It is a testament to their deep attunement, using the interaction of light, water, and motion as a living instrument. Yet the sun and stars chart the way across emptiness, but the goal is land. Long before an island appears as a smudge on the horizon, the ocean begins to whisper its presence through the creatures that call it home. The ocean speaks through its inhabitants. For a navigator on the vast blue, the most urgent messages are carried on wings. Among all the signs of the natural world, seabirds become living compasses, their behaviors a direct and reliable signal etched against the sky. The most revered of these feathered guides across much of Polynesia is the Manu Oku, the white tern. This small, graceful bird with snow-white plumage holds a secret in its daily routine. Unlike true seabirds that can sleep on the water and feed for weeks far from shore, the white tern is tied to land. It must return to an island every single night to roost and nest. This simple biological fact transforms it into a precision instrument. At dawn, flocks of these terns fly out from their island home to fishing grounds that can be up to 100 miles out to sea. At dusk, they make the long flight back. By observing the direction of these commuting flocks in the morning or evening, a navigator receives a powerful arrow-straight pointer. A stream of white terns flying purposefully in one direction at sunset is not just a pretty sight, it is a glowing signpost reading, "Land lies that way." The density of the flock can even hint at distance. A thick, continuous stream suggests a nearby island, while a thinner, more scattered flow might indicate a longer journey. But the navigator must first know which bird they are watching. This is where deep ecological knowledge becomes critical. The ocean is home to two broad categories of seabirds. Pelagic birds like albatrosses and certain petrels are true ocean wanderers. They can spend years at sea without ever touching land, soaring over the deepest waters. Spotting one of these majestic flyers tells the navigator something important, but it is not a sign of imminent land. It signals you are in the deep, open ocean, the true wilderness of the sea. The other category are the land-based birds like our white tern, along with noddies, boobies, and frigate birds. These are the crucial messengers. Their presence alone is a clue, but their behavior is the true map. A frigate bird circling high overhead might be hunting for flying fish chased to the surface by tuna. That tuna school might in turn be following a current that flows past a submerged seamount, which itself could be a waypoint on a longer journey. Every creature is part of a chain of information. The navigator reads this entire living tapestry. A single bird is a datum. A pattern of behavior across multiple species becomes a confirmed heading. This art turns the voyage from a solitary struggle against the elements into a constant dialogue with a living, breathing world. The sky is not empty. The waves are not silent. They are filled with guides if you know how to listen. Yet, even with stars, swells, sun, and birds, the final approach to a target invisible over the horizon depends on sensing the island's ghost long before it is seen. The sky above the open ocean is not a blank sheet. It is a canvas painted daily with subtle clues that a master navigator learns to read as clearly as a printed sign. Beyond the sun and stars, the clouds themselves become long-distance markers, their shapes and colors whispering secrets from beyond the curve of the earth. One of the most reliable of these sky signs is the stationary cloud. Over the deep ocean, clouds typically drift with the wind, forming and dissolving in a slow procession. But an island disrupts this flow. The landmass heats up under the sun, causing warm air to rise. This rising air cools and condenses, often forming a persistent, puffy cumulus cloud that seems to hang motionless above the island, even as other clouds sail past. From dozens of miles away, that lone, anchored cloud is a beacon. It says, "Beneath me there is land," but the message is not just in the shape, it is also in the light. An island's presence can paint the underside of distant clouds with a specific, telltale glow. Over shallow lagoons or the white sand of a coral reef, sunlight reflects back upward, casting a faint, luminous, greenish or turquoise tint onto the cloud base above. This phenomenon, sometimes called cloud glow, is a ghostly reflection of paradise still hidden below the horizon. For a navigator scanning the skyline, that peculiar patch of brightness is not a trick of the light. It is a confirmed heading, a promise that their mental map is correct and their destination is near. Perhaps the most elusive and mystical of these optical guides is a phenomenon known in some traditions as tilapa, often translated as underwater lightning. This is not light from the sky, but from the depths. On very dark, clear nights far from any land, navigators have reported seeing sudden, brief, and silent streaks of light flickering beneath the surface of the sea. These are not the gentle glow of bioluminescent plankton, but sharp, darting lines like distant electrical sparks racing along a consistent bearing. Traditional knowledge holds that these streaks of tilapa originate from the island itself, shooting out along the ocean floor or through the water in the direction of the landmass. Following these fleeting underwater paths, it is said, will lead you straight to shore. Modern science suggests it may be related to deep-sea bioluminescent organisms or even piezoelectric effects from underwater geological structures, but for the navigator, the explanation is secondary to the result. It is the ocean itself, sending up its own silent, sparkling signal in the absolute dark. Together, these signs form a complete sensory picture. The navigator is not relying on a single sense or a single tool. They are integrating a symphony of information, reading the map written in stars, feeling the highway of the swells, listening to the language of birds, and now interpreting the art of the sky and the light in the water. Every element of the natural world becomes a character in the story of the voyage, each contributing a line to the directions home. This holistic awareness points to something deeper than mere technique. It reveals a fundamental philosophy of wayfinding, a relationship with the world that modern navigation, for all its precision, has left behind. The most profound navigation happens not by sight, but by feel. After days or weeks at sea, with the destination still hidden far beyond the horizon, the master navigator enters a state of deep attunement. They are no longer just steering by the stars or the sun. They are listening with their entire body to a conversation happening beneath the hull, a conversation between the deep ocean and the distant land. This advanced art is often called wave piloting, and it represents the pinnacle of tactile wayfinding. It moves beyond simply following a swell's direction to interpreting the subtle, complex language of waves as they interact with unseen islands. An island is not just a piece of land rising from the sea. It is a massive obstacle in the path of the ocean's energy. The deep, rolling swells that have traveled unimpeded for thousands of miles suddenly encounter this rising seafloor. They cannot pass through it, so they must bend around it, split apart, or bounce back. This disruption creates a new, intricate pattern superimposed on the familiar rhythm of the open ocean. Imagine you are in a quiet room and someone begins playing a steady, deep note on a cello. That is the dominant swell. Now someone else strikes a bell in the corner of the room. The sound waves from the bell bounce off the walls, creating echoes and interference patterns that mix with the cello's note. Your ear can distinguish the original note from the complex echoes. For the navigator lying in the canoe, their body becomes that ear, feeling the deep cello note of the swell while also detecting the faint, new echoes rebounding from the island. One key pattern is the reflected wave. When a primary swell slams into the steep cliffs or slopes of an island, a portion of its energy is thrown back out to sea, creating a secondary swell that moves directly away from the land. To the navigator, this feels like a new counter-rhythm crossing the dominant swell at a sharp angle. It is a collision of energies under the canoe, a shuddering cross-chop that has no business being in the open ocean. Feeling this is like touching a ghostly hand reaching out from the island, a tangible signal saying, "I am there and you are approaching me." The other pattern is refraction. As a swell approaches the more gradual underwater slopes of an island or a submerged reef, its leading edge begins to slow down as it drags on the bottom. The part of the swell still in deep water continues moving fast. This difference in speed causes the entire wave to bend or refract, wrapping itself around the contours of the land. The navigator feels the dominant swell's direction subtly shift, its angle to the canoe changing as if the highway itself is curving. This bending is a map drawn in moving water, tracing the hidden shape of the island still dozens of miles away. Mastering this requires absolute stillness and focus. Apprentices train by being blindfolded in canoes or lying in shallow water for hours, learning to isolate these faint signatures from the chaotic noise of wind waves and currents. They learn to distinguish the hard, sharp echo of a reflected wave from a high volcanic island from the softer, slower bending of a swell around a low coral atoll. This knowledge is so precise that traditional stories speak of navigators not only finding an island, but identifying its specific type and even which side they are approaching, all while it remains invisible over the curve of the earth. It is a form of seeing with the skin, a dialogue between the human body and the planet's own pulse. This tactile intelligence reveals the final, beautiful truth of their science. The map was never separate from the world. It was the world itself, speaking in a language of motion, waiting to be felt. Yet this entire symphony of observation, from stars to swells to birds, is organized by a single, brilliant mental model. The Polynesian navigator does not conceive of their journey as a tiny canoe moving across a static ocean. Instead, they hold in their mind a dynamic, conceptual map known as the Etak. This idea is the master key to their entire system, a piece of abstract reasoning so elegant it rivals any modern mathematical chart. In the Etak system, the navigator imagines their canoe as the fixed, unmoving center of the universe. They are not traveling forward. Instead, the world travels backward beneath them. Picture this from the deck. You are not sailing from island A to island B. You are holding your position while a series of reference islands, some far ahead and some far behind your route, appear to slide slowly backward under specific, fixed points in the star compass. The journey is divided into segments, each called an Etak. An Etak segment begins when a chosen reference island, which may be completely invisible over the horizon, aligns with a certain star rising from a specific house on your mental compass. As you sail, you watch that star. When the reference island has apparently moved backward under the sky until it aligns with the next star point in the sequence, you have completed one Etak. You have mentally consumed a segment of the ocean. It is as if you are pulling the world past you on a great, celestial conveyor belt. This model solves the most critical problem of open ocean navigation without instruments, dead reckoning. How do you know how far you have gone? By counting the Etak segments completed, you have a precise, non-physical measure of progress. You are not guessing miles. You are tracking a process, a ritual of the sky. Each completed Etak tells you that you are one star point closer to your destination. It provides a constant, reassuring sense of position and pace. For a voyage from Tahiti to Hawaii, a navigator might mentally divide the route into 10 or 12 Etak, each marked by the apparent movement of a different reference island under a different star. They do not need to see these islands. They exist as fixed points on their mental sea chart. This abstract framework ties every other observation together. The feeling of the swell, the sight of a bird, the color of a cloud, all these clues now have a context. They tell you which Etak you are in and how close you are to the next one. It transforms a linear, stressful journey into a series of manageable, completed steps. The genius of Etak is that it removes the anxiety of the vast unknown. You are not a speck lost in an immense blue. You are the still point around which the cosmos gracefully turns, bringing your destination to you, one star at a time. This philosophical shift reveals the deepest layer of their wayfinding. It was not just a set of skills, but a complete worldview, a way of being in relationship with the ocean that fostered not just survival, but profound confidence. This confidence was the engine that powered the greatest diaspora in human history, a story written not in ink, but in the wake of countless voyaging canoes. This mental map of Etak provided the grand structure, but sailing between those celestial checkpoints demanded a relentless, moment-by-moment calculation. Every second on the open ocean, the navigator was performing a feat of mental arithmetic we now call dead reckoning, but forget the cold precision of a ship's logbook. This was an intuitive, living estimation woven from the feel of the canoe and the passage of the sun. Speed was not measured in knots with an instrument. It was felt in the body. The navigator would lean over the side, watching the pattern of bubbles and swirls in the canoe's wake, learning to read its texture and length like a signature. A clean, swiftly moving wake meant good speed. A choppy, confused wake might mean they were fighting a hidden current. They calibrated this feel against the known performance of their vessel, memorizing how a fully loaded canoe moved compared to a lighter one. Time was the sun's arc and the stars' march. By knowing which star should be in which house at a given hour and watching the sun's height at noon, the navigator maintained a remarkably accurate internal clock. This was not about knowing the exact minute, but about understanding segments of the day and night, the great celestial gears turning overhead. Direction, of course, was held in the star compass houses and the angle of the swell against the hull. Now the calculation begins. If you have been sailing at an estimated speed on a known course for an estimated length of time, you can plot your new position in your mind. You mentally move your canoe along the Etak segment, but the ocean is never still. A sudden rain squall might push you off course for an hour. A shift in the swell's angle suggests a current is pulling you north. Each of these disturbances is a variable in the equation. The navigator must instantly adjust their mental plot, revising their estimated position based on this new sensory input. Imagine holding a complex, three-dimensional map in your mind that is constantly being redrawn by the wind on your skin and the sound of water against the hull. This is not a calculation done once per day. It is a continuous loop of observation, estimation, and correction, running in the background of the navigator's consciousness for weeks on end. They could not afford to forget their last estimated position, even for a moment. To lose that thread was to become truly lost, with no fixed point of reference to recover. The concentration required is almost beyond comprehension. While others on the canoe might sleep, the navigator catnapped in short, alert bursts, their mind never fully releasing its grip on the numbers. They were the living computer of the voyage, their memory the only hard drive, processing the raw data of the world into a reliable course. This relentless mental discipline was the invisible engine of every successful voyage. It turned the beautiful theory of the star compass and the Etak into a practical, survivable reality. It meant that when the clouds finally parted, the stars they saw would match exactly the stars they had expected to see, confirming they were precisely where their mind's map said they should be. That moment of celestial confirmation after days of blind sailing was the navigator's greatest reward, a silent testament to the power of a human mind in perfect dialogue with the world. This entire system of wayfinding did not spring fully formed from the sea. Its origins lie far to the west, in the lush islands and archipelagos of Southeast Asia, among the ancestors of the Austronesian-speaking peoples. The story of Pacific navigation begins not with a single leap, but with a slow, deliberate expansion, a millennia-long conversation between people and the ocean that gradually built the technology and the knowledge for the great voyages to come. For generations, these communities lived among the islands of what we now call the Philippines, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Here, the sea was not a barrier but a connective highway. Travel was between visible islands, often within sight of land or with known landmarks on the horizon. In this environment, the first principles were born. They learned to read seasonal wind patterns, the monsoons that blew predictably from one direction for half the year, then reversed. They observed the habits of coastal birds and the way clouds gathered over high peaks. This was the nursery of wayfinding. The critical leap, the one that would change human history, was the development of the vessel capable of turning this coastal knowledge into a tool for true exploration. The innovation was the outrigger canoe, stabilized by a lateral float paired with the ingenious crab-claw sail. This was not a raft at the mercy of the waves. It was a masterpiece of maritime engineering. The outrigger provided stability in open ocean swells, allowing the canoe to sail across the wind, not just before it. The tall, crescent-shaped sail, resembling a crab's claw, could catch the wind with remarkable efficiency, driving the vessel forward and, crucially, allowing it to tack, to sail at an angle against the wind. This gave navigators a degree of control and choice unknown to simple drift voyagers. They could now sail to a destination, not just be carried toward it. With this technology, around 4,000 years ago, these seafaring cultures began to push their boundaries. They island hopped from Taiwan into the Philippines, then eastward through the vast Indonesian archipelago. Each successful voyage added to the collective memory. New star paths were memorized for new routes. The behavior of unfamiliar seabirds was noted. The feel of new ocean swells was catalogued in story and song. This was a period of practice and refinement, a gradual building of the mental library that would later be used in the vast emptiness of the open Pacific. The true test and the final forging of the complete wayfinding system came when they reached the edge of what is known as Near Oceania, around the Solomon Islands. Beyond this point lay the unknown, a realm with a new name, Remote Oceania. Here, the islands were no longer intervisible. Voyages would now require journeys of hundreds of miles without any sight of land, trusting entirely to the signs of the ocean and the sky. It was here, facing the great blue void, that their coastal knowledge transformed into a true science of open ocean navigation. The star compass was likely formalized. The deep reading of swells became essential. The Etak concept provided a mental model for these terrifyingly long passages. This was the genesis, a slow burn of innovation across generations, setting the stage for the most audacious chapter in the human story, the deliberate settlement of the Pacific. The horizon they faced was unlike any before. Beyond the Solomon Islands, the familiar world of intervisible shores vanished, replaced by an ocean so immense it demanded a new kind of courage. The people who answered that call are known to archaeologists as the Lapita, the true pioneers who first dared the deep blue. We know them not from written records, but from the beautiful, intricate fragments of pottery they left behind on beach after beach, a trail of broken clay that maps their incredible journey. Their story is the prologue to everything that followed, the moment when coastal voyaging transformed into oceanic destiny. For generations, their ancestors had mastered the island-rich waters of Near Oceania. But around 3,500 years ago, a group of them made a conscious choice. They loaded their distinctive outrigger canoes with families, plants, and animals and sailed east into remote Oceania, where the next island could be a month away over an empty horizon. What drove them is a mystery woven from possibility. Perhaps growing populations sought new land. Maybe shifting trade winds opened a temporary window. Or it could have been the simple, timeless human urge to see what lies beyond the known. Whatever the reason, their voyage was an act of profound faith in their wayfinding skills. They were betting their lives and the lives of their children on their ability to read stars and swells they had never followed before, and they succeeded. Their archaeological signature, that elegant pottery stamped with intricate geometric designs, begins to appear on islands across the Western Pacific. They reached Vanuatu, New Caledonia, and then made the monumental leap to Fiji. From there, they pressed on to Tonga and Samoa. Each new island group was farther apart than the last, each voyage a longer stretch into the unknown. This was not a single, frantic exodus. It was a deliberate, staged expansion, a slow filling of the oceanic map. They would find and settle an island group, live there for generations, and then, when the time was right or the need arose, a new wave of explorers would set out from this now familiar shore, using it as a stepping stone to push the frontier even farther east. The Lapita were not just sailors, they were founding societies. They carried with them a portable ecosystem, the very ingredients of life. In their canoes were seedlings of vital crops like taro, yam, and breadfruit, and the small animals they relied on like chickens, pigs, and dogs. They were not just discovering new lands, they were bringing the old world with them to create new ones. This transfer of life is why so many Pacific islands, despite their incredible isolation, share a similar suite of plants and animals. It was a conscious act of colonization, replicating the familiar in the midst of the utterly new. Their pottery tells a fascinating story of adaptation and change. The earliest shards found in the Bismarck archipelago are elaborate with finely drawn patterns. As the Lapita moved farther and farther east across thousands of miles of ocean, the designs on their pots gradually simplified. The reasons are practical. Long voyages in crowded canoes meant breakable luxury items were a risk. The priority shifted from artistic complexity to sheer survival and the establishment of a foothold in a virgin landscape. Eventually, in the eastern reaches of their expansion, in places like Tonga and Samoa, the pottery tradition faded away altogether. The challenges of finding suitable clay on new islands and the pressing needs of building a society from scratch likely made other technologies more urgent. This fading of the pottery trail is not an end but a transformation. By around 2,500 years ago, the distinct Lapita culture had evolved into what we recognize as the ancestral Polynesian society. They had reached the natural pause point, the western edge of the Polynesian Triangle. Here, in the islands of Tonga and Samoa, they stayed, consolidated, and refined their culture for over 1,000 years. They perfected their canoe designs, deepened their navigational lore, and developed the unique social and linguistic patterns that would define their descendants. The Lapita Horizon was the foundational voyage. They proved the ocean could be crossed not by accident but by skill and intention. They established the beachheads from which the next, even greater wave of exploration would launch, a wave that would complete the settlement of the largest ocean on Earth. The stage was now set, the knowledge hardened by experience and the canoes waiting. The Polynesian Explosion was about to begin. For over 1,000 years, the Great Migration seemed to halt. The trail of Lapita pottery ended, and the swift eastward expansion from Southeast Asia settled into a long, deep breath. But this was not a period of forgetting. In the islands of Western Polynesia, in the archipelagos of Fiji, Tonga, and Samoa, the voyaging culture entered a crucible of refinement. The ocean had provided the ultimate test, and now the people had the time to perfect their answers. This was the Polynesian pause, a centuries-long chapter of profound technological and cultural fermentation. The pioneers were no longer just pushing against an unknown horizon. They were building the foundation from which their descendants would launch the final, most spectacular phase of exploration. The canoes that had carried them this far were good, but for the vast stretches ahead, they needed to be extraordinary, so the shipwrights experimented. They developed the double-hulled voyaging canoe, or Hōkūleʻa, by lashing two large hulls together with a solid platform in between. They created a vessel of immense stability and cargo capacity. This was no longer just a boat, it was a floating village. It could carry dozens of people, along with all the food, water, plants, and animals needed to not just reach a new island, but to successfully colonize it. The iconic crab claw sail was refined into a soaring, efficient wing that could harness the slightest breeze. Every joint, every lashing, every curve of the hull was perfected through generations of trial and observation, turning the canoe into a living extension of the navigator's will. Simultaneously, the art of wayfinding was codified and deepened. The star compass was not just memorized, it was woven into chants and dances, ensuring its preservation. Navigators had the time to study the subtle differences in swell patterns between archipelagos, to catalog the specific bird species that signaled each type of landfall. The Etak system, the mental model of pulling islands under the stars, was likely formalized during this era, providing a reliable intellectual framework for voyages that would span thousands of miles without a single visual landmark. On land, they perfected the subsistence strategies that would make long voyages and new settlements possible. They developed sophisticated methods of food preservation, like fermenting breadfruit into durable paste. They learned which crop varieties were most resilient and which animals bred best in the confines of a canoe. This was not a pause in the sense of inactivity. It was a strategic consolidation, a gathering of strength and knowledge. The ocean had taught them its rules, and now they were crafting the ultimate tools to master it. They were building a complete, self-sufficient voyaging culture where every member, from the farmer to the sailmaker to the chanter of star paths, played a role in the next great leap. When the time was right, when population pressures or the simple call of the horizon grew strong again, they would be ready. The pause was the coiled spring, and the energy stored within it was about to unleash the Polynesian explosion across the remaining two-thirds of the Pacific. The long pause in Western Polynesia was the gathering of a wave. Around 1,500 years ago, that wave finally crested and broke, rushing outward in three breathtaking directions to fill the remaining emptiness of the Polynesian Triangle. From a central hub, most likely the Society Islands like Tahiti, a new generation of navigators launched the most ambitious voyages in human history. These were not random drifts, they were deliberate missions of colonization, targeting the farthest corners of their oceanic world with stunning precision. To the north, they sailed into the vast, empty expanse of the North Pacific, guided by the steady trade winds and the rising arc of new stars. Their destination was a chain of volcanic islands strung across the ocean like a necklace, the place we now call Hawaii. This voyage of over 2,500 miles required navigating beyond the familiar band of the tropics, learning new celestial markers and enduring colder seas. Yet they found it and settled it, bringing with them the sacred taro and the language that would become Hawaiian. In the opposite direction, to the southeast, they embarked on an even more audacious journey. Steering into the prevailing winds and currents, a feat that demonstrates remarkable sailing skill, they aimed for the most isolated inhabited island on the planet, Rapa Nui or Easter Island. This journey of over 2,000 miles into the open southeastern Pacific is a testament to sheer navigational courage. Finding that tiny speck of land was like threading a needle from 1,000 miles away. And finally, to the southwest, they undertook a voyage of a different character, setting their course by the setting stars and the swell patterns of the Southern Ocean. They sailed until they encountered a land unlike any in the tropics, a pair of great, mist-shrouded islands with snow-capped mountains and temperate forests. This was Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, New Zealand. The settlement of these 3 points, Hawaii, Rapa Nui, and Aotearoa, completed the Polynesian Triangle. Each leg was a masterclass in intentional wayfinding. They were not lost, they were searching, and they found exactly what they were looking for, transforming the greatest ocean into a connected world of family, culture, and shared memory. The success of these epic voyages rested not just on the mind of the navigator, but on the very structure of the vessel he commanded. The Polynesian double-hulled voyaging canoe, known as the Hōkūleʻa, was a masterpiece of maritime engineering, a design perfectly adapted to the unique demands of the Pacific. It was not a ship built to conquer the ocean, but to partner with it. At its heart were two long, slender hulls carved from massive tree trunks and lashed together parallel by strong crossbeams. This twin-hull design provided immense stability in the rolling swells of the open ocean. Unlike a single-hull boat that heels over sharply in the wind, the double hull remained relatively level, a crucial feature for a vessel that was also a home, carrying families, livestock, and delicate seedlings across months at sea. Between these hulls stretched a solid platform, the main deck, which often supported small thatched shelters for protection from sun and rain. This platform was the living space and cargo hold, a floating island that carried everything needed to start a new life on a distant shore. The soul of the canoe was its sail. The Polynesian crab claw sail was a work of aerodynamic genius. Shaped like a crescent moon or the claw of its namesake, this tall, flexible sail was made from woven pandanus leaves. Its shape allowed it to capture wind with remarkable efficiency, but its true brilliance was in its ability to let the canoe sail windward, to make progress against the direction of the wind. This was a capability often misunderstood by early European observers. European ships of the age, with their deep keels and square sails, were masters of sailing downwind, running before the breeze. To sail into the wind, they had to perform a complex and labor-intensive maneuver called tacking, zigzagging back and forth at sharp angles. The crab claw sail, combined with the canoe's shallow draft and pivoting centerboards, allowed Polynesian navigators to point much closer to the wind, making steady headway on a more direct course. This was not a minor difference, it was the key to intentional exploration. It meant a navigator could choose a destination that lay somewhat into the prevailing wind, confident they could work their way there. They were not merely passengers on the wind's whim, they were directors of their own journey. Every component was lashed together with coconut fiber cordage, not nailed or pegged. This created a flexible, living structure. In heavy seas, the canoe could twist and flex with the waves, absorbing stresses that would shatter a rigid, European-style hull. The entire vessel was a testament to sustainable technology, built from island materials and held together by knowledge passed through generations. This was the vehicle of discovery, a mobile piece of homeland that carried the future within its lashings, making the impossible distances of the Polynesian Triangle not just crossable but repeatable. Their canoes were masterpieces of wood and fiber, but the true vessel of exploration was the human mind. In a world without a single written word, the entire encyclopedia of the Pacific, every star, every current, every island had to be carried in memory and passed from one generation to the next with flawless accuracy. This was not a casual oral tradition. It was a sophisticated, rigorous system of knowledge preservation, turning sound and rhythm into a living database. Primary tools were chants, songs, and stories, meticulously crafted as mnemonic devices. A single chant could be a sailing direction. Its rhythm might mirror the steady roll of a specific ocean swell. Its verses could list in precise order the succession of stars that would rise on a voyage from one island to another. Place names were not just labels, they were data points. By reciting the genealogies of a place, a navigator was recalling its position relative to others, embedding geography into family history. A story about an ancestral hero chasing a great fish across the sea might secretly encode the seasonal path of a migratory bird species, a vital signpost for a particular route. This knowledge was organized into layers, accessible only to those trained to decode it. Apprenticeship was total immersion, often beginning in early childhood. A student would not simply be told which star rose in the east. They would learn a chant that named that star, described its color, linked it to a specific god or ancestor, and listed the 3 stars that followed it. They would learn this chant while sitting in a canoe at night, feeling the wind, so the memory became a multisensory experience. the training was relentless and hierarchical. Younger students might first memorize the names and characteristics of hundreds of fish and birds, building a foundational vocabulary of the natural world. Later, they would learn the simpler star paths for local travel. Only after years of proving their memory and discipline would they be entrusted with the great voyaging chants, the sacred texts of their culture. The navigator's mind became a library, each chant a volume, each genealogy a map. Forgetting a line was not a minor error. It could mean missing a turn on a star path hundreds of miles from land. This oral encyclopedia was dynamic, too. When a new island was discovered, new chants were composed to fix its location within the cosmic web of known places, updating the collective memory for all who would come after. This was how a map of the largest ocean on Earth was drawn not in ink, but in breath and rhythm, a songline across the sea. This knowledge was not taught in a classroom, but earned through a lifetime of devotion. The path to becoming a master navigator, a PWO, was a sacred journey that began not at sea, but in the mind of a child. From the earliest age, a chosen apprentice would be immersed in a world of observation. Their first lessons happened on solid ground under the night sky. An elder would point to a bright star, not just naming it, but weaving its story into a chant, linking it to an ancestor, a season, and a specific direction on the mental star compass. The child's task was to memorize this, then the next star, and the next, until the entire rotating dome of the heavens was a familiar neighborhood, each celestial body a known resident with a predictable path. This was rote learning of the most profound kind, building the foundational grid upon which all future wayfinding would depend. As the apprentice grew, their training expanded to the shoreline. They would spend hours, then days, sitting or lying in the shallows or in a gently rocking canoe just offshore. Here, they learned to read the ocean's pulse with their body. Eyes closed, they focused on distinguishing the deep, rhythmic roll of the primary swell from the chaotic chop of local wind waves. They learned to identify the subtle shudder of a reflected wave, the faint echo of a distant island, long before they were ever allowed to sail toward one. On the beach, they studied the clouds, learning to differentiate the high, drifting cirrus from the low, stationary cumulus that might betray an unseen landmass over the horizon. Every sense was being calibrated. They learned the flight patterns of seabirds, the smell of the air before a storm, the way certain stars twinkled differently when land was near. This was sensory education, turning their own body into the most sensitive instrument on the canoe. The first open-water voyages were short, inter-island trips under the watchful eye of a master. These were practical exams. The apprentice would be asked to state their heading based on the night stars, then confirm it at dawn by the sun's position. They would be quizzed on the names of the swells hitting the hull and what those angles meant for their course. Mistakes were not merely corrected, they were analyzed, their root cause explored in story and analogy. The master was not just teaching technique but intuition, the ability to synthesize a dozen streams of sensory input into a single, unwavering sense of place. The apprentice learned to maintain their mental dead reckoning, to hold their estimated position in their mind like a precious flame, shielding it from the distraction of fatigue or fear. The culmination was the PWO ceremony, a sacred initiation after years, often decades of training. This was more than a graduation. It was a spiritual transformation, marking the individual's readiness to be solely responsible for the lives of others in the heart of the ocean. Following this, the new master navigator would undertake their first long journey, a voyage of thousands of miles as the lead wayfinder. Yet even then, the learning never truly ended. Each voyage added new layers to their mental map, new refinements to their art. The apprenticeship was a process of internalizing the world until the star paths, the swell patterns, and the language of the birds were not external knowledge, but an instinct as deep as breathing. This was how a human being became a living compass, a vessel for the collective memory of the Pacific itself. But such a precious, intricate system, held solely in memory and ritual, faced an existential threat the moment a different world sailed over the horizon. The vast voyages were never just about the thrill of finding new lands. They were the vital arteries of an entire civilization, a network of connection that sustained life across thousands of miles of isolation. The purpose of voyaging was woven into the very fabric of Polynesian society, transforming navigation from a solitary skill into a social and economic necessity. Imagine a community on a small atoll. The island provides fish and coconuts, but it lacks a crucial resource, hard volcanic stone needed to make durable adzes, the essential tools for farming and canoe building. The nearest source of that stone might be an island hundreds of miles away, so a voyage is planned not as an exploration into the unknown, but as a deliberate trading mission. The canoe is loaded with fine mats, prized feathers, or preserved food. The navigator follows a well-known star path to the quarry island, where their goods are exchanged for blocks of precious basalt. This was long-distance logistics powered by celestial knowledge. Voyagers also served as the internet of their time, carrying news, innovations, and cultural practices. A new chant, a more efficient fishing technique, or a design for a stronger sail could travel from one archipelago to another, carried by navigators who are also messengers and diplomats. These journeys maintained a shared identity across the immense Polynesian world, reminding scattered communities that they were part of a greater family. Perhaps one of the most important reasons for voyaging was to forge and strengthen alliances. Marriage between chiefly families on different islands was a common strategy to build political bonds and ensure mutual support in times of need. A navigator might be tasked with a sacred mission, transporting a high-ranking bride or groom across the sea to seal a powerful union. These voyages required not just skill, but immense trust and protocol, as the navigator carried the future of two communities in their care. There were also voyages of migration, driven by the pressures of growing populations, internal conflict, or the simple human desire for a fresh start on new shores. Unlike the initial discovery voyages, these were planned relocations, with canoes serving as arcs carrying entire cross-sections of society, from priests and farmers to craftsmen and children, along with the seedlings and animals needed to rebuild their world. And yes, there were voyages of political expansion and ambition, where a powerful chief would send fleets to establish authority over new territories or to bring distant islands into their sphere of influence. In every case, the navigator was more than a pilot. They were the crucial link, the enabler of a society that refused to be defined by the distances between its homes. The ocean was not a barrier that separated them, it was the pathway that connected everything. This deep integration of wayfinding into daily life meant the knowledge was not locked away in a tower. It was alive in the marketplace, the marriage ceremony, and the council of chiefs. The survival of the culture depended on the navigator's ability to read the stars, making their art the most respected and essential profession in the Pacific. This societal purpose answers a profound question. Why did they keep voyaging long after the map was filled in? Because the map was never complete. It was a living network of relationships, constantly being renewed with every voyage that carried a gift, a message, or a promise across the star-lit sea. This brilliant network of connection, however, did not last forever. The great voyaging canoes that had woven the Pacific together gradually ceased their long journeys. The age of exploration gave way to an age of settlement, and the star paths that connected distant cousins grew faint from disuse. This was not a sudden collapse of knowledge, but a slow turning inward, a cultural shift with deep and understandable roots. On the vast, resource-rich islands like Aotearoa and Hawaiʻi, the urgent need to voyage diminished. Why risk a perilous month-long journey across open ocean when your new home offered everything required for life? Valleys in Hawaii could produce immense quantities of taro. The forests of Aotearoa were filled with birds and resources unknown in the tropical homeland. Communities turned their energy inward toward cultivating and mastering these new landscapes. The social and economic engine that drove long-distance voyaging, the need to trade for specific goods or secure political alliances, simply lost its steam when each island became largely self-sufficient. The ocean, once a highway, began to look more like a moat. Environmental factors may have also quietly shifted the odds. Some researchers point to evidence of climatic changes in the Pacific around this time, subtle shifts in the prevailing wind patterns or storm frequencies that made long voyages more unpredictable or dangerous. The reliable pathways memorized over generations might have become less reliable, increasing the risk for a society that no longer saw an immediate reward for taking that risk. The knowledge was still there, held by navigators and chanters, but its practice became ceremonial rather than essential, a revered tradition rather than a daily necessity. This gradual hiatus meant that when a far more disruptive force arrived, the voyaging tradition was already vulnerable. The arrival of European ships in the Pacific, beginning in the 16th century, introduced forces that the island societies could not have anticipated. The contact brought new materials, new ideas, and also new and devastating illnesses for which Pacific populations had no immunity. The resulting loss of life was catastrophic on a scale that is difficult to comprehend. Communities were devastated, social structures were fractured, and with them, the intergenerational chains of knowledge transmission were often broken. When a master navigator and all his apprentices were lost, an entire library of chants, star paths, and wave lore could vanish in a single season. European colonization further accelerated this forgetting. New religious practices often discouraged or banned traditional navigation chants and ceremonies, labeling them as pagan. Colonial economies redirected labor and attention away from the immense communal effort required to build and sail voyaging canoes. The written word and the magnetic compass were presented as superior technologies, implicitly devaluing the profound mental science that had settled the ocean. The map held in memory, the greatest achievement of Pacific peoples, was pushed to the very brink of extinction, surviving only in fragments, in old stories, and in the determined hearts of a few elders who remembered that their ancestors had not drifted but had sailed. This period of forgetting, however, sets the stage for one of the most remarkable cultural revivals in modern history, a story not of loss but of miraculous recovery. The first European ships to enter Polynesian waters carried a very different kind of map. For captains like James Cook, navigation was a process of reduction. The vast, living ocean was distilled into numbers on a page, measured by the angle of the sun, calculated with brass instruments, and fixed onto parchment charts with precise lines of latitude and longitude. Their world was one of abstraction, where the chaotic reality of wind and wave was tamed by mathematics and recorded in ink. When these explorers made contact with Polynesian societies in the late 18th century, they were met with a cognitive shock. The islanders they encountered possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of the Pacific that defied European logic. Without charts or instruments, a Tahitian navigator named Tupaia was able to recite for Captain Cook the names and directions to dozens of islands, some over 2,000 miles away, islands that the Europeans had not yet found on their own maps. Tupaia could even draw a rough chart from memory, placing islands in their correct relative positions across an immense expanse of ocean. To the Europeans, this was both astonishing and deeply puzzling. How could someone hold such a detailed mental map without the tools of written science? The two systems represented a fundamental clash in how humans understand space. European navigation was instrumental and external. It relied on devices that measured the world from a distance, translating sensory experience into numerical data that could be stored independently of the navigator. The compass gave a fixed magnetic north. The sextant captured the sun's altitude at a single moment. The logbook recorded a cumulative linear track. The map was the ultimate authority, an objective representation that existed outside of any one person's perception. Polynesian wayfinding, in stark contrast, was experiential and internal. Its authority came from direct, sustained engagement with the environment. The map was not on parchment, it was the pattern of stars overhead, the rhythm of the swell under the hull, the behavior of birds at dusk. It was a dynamic, participatory knowledge that lived in the body and mind of the navigator and in the shared memory of the community. One system sought to conquer the unknown by imposing a grid upon it. The other sought to understand the unknown by becoming fluent in its language. This clash often led to profound mutual misunderstanding. European sailors, seeing no written records or complex instruments, frequently dismissed Polynesian knowledge as primitive guesswork or luck. They could not see the immense mental architecture, the star compass, the Etak system, the years of sensory training. Conversely, Polynesians sometimes viewed the European fixation on ticking sticks, their clocks and sextants, with curiosity or amusement, seeing them as clumsy substitutes for the direct awareness their own navigators cultivated. The tragedy was not just a conflict of technologies, but a failure of imagination. The Europeans, armed with the power of their printed charts and global empires, often could not recognize the sophisticated science unfolding before them. They saw the canoe, but not the cosmology that guided it. This initial encounter set in motion a slow, centuries-long erosion, where one way of knowing the world, backed by overwhelming force, began to overshadow another. Yet within that very clash, a seed was planted. The detailed testimony of men like Tupaia, recorded in European journals, would later become a crucial clue for those seeking to recover what had been nearly lost, a whispered fragment of the old map waiting to be read again. Tupaia's map was a mystery European science could not easily solve. In the decades and centuries that followed, a convenient myth took root in Western academic circles, one that would stubbornly persist for generations. Lacking the framework to understand a science of memory and sensory observation, many scholars concluded that the settlement of the Pacific could not have been intentional. They proposed what became known as the accidental drift theory. The idea was simple and to them logical. Primitive people in simple rafts, the theory went, must have been caught in storms or strong currents and blown helplessly across the ocean, washing up by pure luck on distant shores. Their presence across the islands was not a triumph of navigation, but a testament to random chance and fortunate survival. This interpretation did more than just get the facts wrong. It performed a profound act of intellectual dismissal. By attributing the greatest human migration to accident, it stripped the Polynesian peoples of their agency, their ingenuity, and their monumental achievement. It framed them as passive children of the sea, rather than as the master mariners they truly were. The foundations of this myth were built on a specific kind of cultural blindness. European scholars of the 18th and 19th centuries operated within a worldview that equated technological complexity with intelligence. A civilization without written records, without metal tools, without navigational instruments, was by their definition primitive. The idea that a complex, rigorous science could be contained entirely within oral tradition, within chants and stories and embodied knowledge, was literally unthinkable to them. They could see the double-hulled canoes, but they could not see the star compass etched in the navigator's mind. They could hear the chants, but they could not decode the sailing directions encrypted within the poetry. So they dismissed it all as legend and superstition, filling the gap in their own understanding with a story of helpless drift. This myth was incredibly damaging. It was written into textbooks, taught in universities, and presented as settled historical fact. It shaped how the world understood Polynesian history, and perhaps more insidiously, it shaped how some Polynesian communities began to understand their own past. The proud genealogies of voyagers became overshadowed by a narrative of accidental discovery. The intentional became incidental. This scholarly dismissal created a void, a silence where a great history should have been. It set up a profound need, not just for correction but for recovery. If the true story was to be told, it would require more than arguing against a theory. It would require proving the science was real, by once again sailing the ancient paths without a compass or a chart, and showing the world what intentional voyaging truly looked like. The myth of accidental drift was a story told about the Pacific, not by it. For the truth to be heard, the ocean itself would need a voice. That voice arrived in the form of a canoe, built not from ancient memory, but from a modern hunger to reclaim it. In the early 1970s, a group of Hawaiian artists, historians, and sailors conceived of an audacious project. They would build a traditional Polynesian voyaging canoe, using only the materials and designs of their ancestors, and sail it across 2,500 miles of open ocean from Hawaii to Tahiti. Their vessel was named Hōkūleʻa, Star of Gladness, a reference to the zenith star that passes directly over the Hawaiian Islands. This was not a historical reenactment for a museum. It was a scientific and cultural experiment with a single, powerful goal: to prove, once and for all, that the settlement of the Pacific was an act of brilliant, intentional navigation. The team faced a daunting challenge. In Hawaii, the knowledge of deep ocean wayfinding had been dormant for centuries. The star compass, the swell patterns, the sacred chants, they existed only in fragments of stories and scholarly notes. The canoe could be built from historical records, but who would navigate it? They needed a living master, a keeper of the old ways. Their search led them across the Pacific to a small island in Micronesia named Satawal. There they found a man named Piailug. Mau was a PWO, a master navigator initiated in the ancient tradition of his people. He held in his mind a complete voyaging knowledge, the star paths and wave lore that had guided his ancestors for generations. When the Hawaiian group asked him to teach them, to guide Hōkūleʻa on its maiden voyage, he agreed. It was a decision that would change the course of history. Mau saw that in Hawaii, the children no longer knew how their ancestors had found the islands. He saw a people disconnected from their own legacy. For him, sharing his knowledge was not just about a single voyage, it was about healing a broken connection. In the spring of 1976, Hōkūleʻa set sail from Hawaii with Piailug as its navigator. He used no instruments, no charts, no compass. He stood on the deck, reading the stars at night, feeling the swells by day, watching the flight of birds. He guided the canoe through storms and calms, holding the course entirely in his mind. For 30 days, the crew sailed by his word alone, trusting a science most of them did not yet understand. When the lush green peaks of Tahiti finally rose from the sea, the proof was undeniable. The voyage of Hōkūleʻa was a seismic event. It shattered the academic myth of accidental drift in the most public way possible, by demonstrating the science in action. For the people of Hawaii and across Polynesia, it was a cultural awakening. It was not just a canoe that had arrived in Tahiti, it was a recovered identity. Piailug had done more than navigate a boat. He had navigated a people back to their own heritage, igniting a renaissance that would see the lost star paths blaze to life once more across the Pacific. Piailug carried a world inside him. On his small home island of Satawal, he was one of the last initiated PWO, a master navigator who held the complete, living knowledge of the star compass, the wave patterns, and the long chants that mapped the ocean. In his culture, this sacred knowledge was traditionally guarded, passed only to chosen sons within the family after years of secret, rigorous training. It was the ultimate treasure of his people. Yet, when a group of Hawaiians arrived in the 1970s, seeking to rebuild their own lost voyaging heritage, Mau made a decision that would break with centuries of tradition. He chose to share everything. He saw that in Hawaii, the children had forgotten how their ancestors had found the islands. The star paths had grown dark in their memory. For Mau, knowledge that was not used, that was not sailed, was knowledge that was already dying. He understood that to save the art of wayfinding itself, he would have to give it away, to plant it in new soil across the sea. So he agreed to come to Hawaii and teach. His first and most famous student was a young man named Nainoa Thompson. Nainoa had grown up in modern Honolulu, a world of streetlights that drowned out the stars. He knew the stories of the ancestors, but he did not know the science. Under Mau's patient, demanding guidance, Nainoa had to learn to see the world again, as if for the first time. Mau did not simply give him a list of stars, he taught him a relationship. He would take Nainoa out onto the water at night, point to a bright point of light, and say, "That star is your friend. You must know where it is born from the sea and where it goes to sleep. You must know its whole life." The lessons were physical and profound. Mau taught him to lie down in a small, rocking boat in the harbor, to close his eyes and focus only on the feeling of the swell, to distinguish its deep rhythm from the slap of the wind waves. He was teaching Nainoa to feel the ocean's pulse with his own body, to make his skin an instrument. The knowledge transfer was a monumental act of trust and translation. Mau spoke little English, and Nainoa did not speak Mau's language. They communicated through gesture, through drawing star patterns in the sand, through long silences on the water, watching the same horizon. Mau was not just transferring data, he was transferring a state of being, a way of thinking and perceiving that was utterly foreign to the modern world. When the time came for Hōkūleʻa's first voyage to Tahiti in 1976, it was Mau who stood as navigator. He was the living bridge, the one who could still hear the ocean's oldest language. For 30 days and nights, he guided the canoe across 2,000 miles without a single instrument, his mind the sole chart. When land was sighted, proving the route was not a legend but a repeatable fact, Mau's quiet smile held the weight of centuries. He had done more than navigate a canoe, he had navigated a people back to themselves. In sharing his sacred knowledge, Mau Piailug performed the ultimate act of wayfinding, steering an entire culture away from the reefs of forgetting and back onto the star path of their own identity. His legacy was not in keeping a secret, but in becoming the teacher who made the secret obsolete, by giving it new life in a new generation of voyagers. Nainoa Thompson faced a sky he could not read. He had grown up in Honolulu, where the electric glow of the city washed out the stars, and his academic training was in modern science, not ancestral chants. When he first stood before Mau Piailug, the master navigator from Satawal, Nainoa realized his own mind was the first frontier he would have to cross. To relearn what his ancestors knew, he had to bridge two worlds, merging the intuitive, embodied knowledge of the past with the analytical precision of the present. His journey was not about rejecting the modern, but about creating a new synthesis, a living science for a new generation. This meant he had to translate Mau's star compass, a system built for the latitudes of Micronesia, into a framework that worked for the unique skies over Hawaii and Tahiti. He spent countless nights with star charts and planetarium software, not to replace the old ways, but to understand them at a molecular level. He learned the precise declination of stars, their exact angular distance north or south of the celestial equator. This modern astronomical data allowed him to predict, with mathematical certainty, exactly where a star would rise on a specific night from a specific location on Earth. He then took that cold calculation and fused it with the warm, living knowledge Mau had given him. He learned to feel the difference between the intellectual fact of a star's position and the experienced reality of watching it emerge from a specific point on the sea's dark rim. From this synthesis, Nainoa constructed his own modern star compass, a 32-house mental grid specifically calibrated for the Hawaiian star paths. It was a map built from both database and dream. The ultimate test came in 1980 when Nainoa, now the student who had become a master, took the helm of Hōkūleʻa as its sole navigator for a second voyage to Tahiti. He was the first Hawaiian in over 600 years to attempt such a long-distance, open ocean voyage using only non-instrumental wayfinding. For 31 days, he was the canoe's living brain. He guided by the stars at night, by the sun and swells by day, constantly updating his mental dead reckoning, holding an entire ocean in his thoughts. When the crew finally sighted the island of Matava, and then Tahiti itself, the achievement was monumental. It proved that the ancient system was not a fragile relic, but a robust, teachable science. Nainoa had not simply replicated a historical feat. He had validated a process of rediscovery. He demonstrated that the star paths were not lost, only waiting to be re-walked by those willing to learn the language of the sky in their own time, with their own tools. His success turned a cultural revival into a living practice, ensuring that the knowledge would not be a museum piece, but a sailing tradition once again. The revival of Hōkūleʻa offered living proof, but the story of the Pacific is also written in the earth. For decades, the academic world debated the possibility of intentional voyaging, often dismissing oral histories as myth. Yet, quietly and systematically, the tools of modern science began to uncover a different story, one that perfectly corroborates the wisdom held in chant and memory. Archaeology does not deal in legends, it deals in physical evidence, in fragments of pottery, in ancient fire pits, and in the preserved pollen of plants. And this evidence has become the silent, undeniable witness to the greatest migration. Take the simple, humble sweet potato. This starchy tuber, a staple food across Polynesia, presents a fascinating puzzle. Its biological origins are unmistakably in the Americas. For it to be growing on islands like Rapa Nui and Hawaiʻi thousands of years before European contact, only one explanation fits. Polynesian voyagers must have reached South America and returned home, bringing the precious crop with them. Genetic studies of ancient sweet potato varieties confirm this incredible journey. The plant's Polynesian name, kumara, bears a striking resemblance to its Quechuan name, kumar, in the Andes. This is not a coincidence of drift, it is a receipt from a round-trip voyage, a botanical signature of intentional exploration, an exchange across the greatest ocean. The evidence extends to the animals they carried. The bones of the Polynesian rat, the chicken, and the pig appear in archaeological layers on island after island, always arriving with the first human settlements. These were not stowaways, they were cargo. Transporting live animals across thousands of miles of open ocean on a canoe is an immense logistical challenge, one undertaken only by people with a clear plan to establish a permanent, self-sufficient new home. Perhaps the most compelling timeline comes from radiocarbon dating. By analyzing charcoal from ancient cooking fires and artifacts from the earliest settlement sites, archaeologists have been able to map the chronology of the Polynesian expansion with remarkable precision. The dates form a clear, sequential trail, like footprints across the sea. Settlement radiates eastward from the Samoa and Tonga region, reaching the Society Islands around 1,200 years ago. Then, like spokes from a hub, the dates fan out, with Hawaiʻi settled by around 900 years ago, Rapa Nui by 800, and Aotearoa by 750. This pattern is not random. It matches the logical progression of exploration described in oral histories, where new islands became bases for the next leap. The dates also align perfectly with known windows of favorable wind and current patterns, the very weather windows a master navigator would wait for. The science of the past confirms the logic of the voyagers. They moved when the ocean told them it was time, linguistics adds another layer of validation. The Polynesian languages from Hawaiʻi to Aotearoa to Rapa Nui are strikingly similar, like dialects of a single ancestral tongue. By comparing these languages, scholars can trace a family tree of divergence. The degree of difference between, say, Tahitian and Maori allows linguists to estimate how long ago the populations separated, and their calculations closely mirror the archaeological timeline. Even more telling are the shared words for voyaging technology and concepts. The word for canoe, waka in Maori, va in Tahitian, and wa in Hawaiian, all descend from a common Proto-Polynesian root. The same is true for words denoting directions, stars, and parts of the sail. This shared vocabulary is a fossilized map of a shared knowledge system, carried in language itself as people intentionally sailed into new horizons. Together, this triad of evidence, botanical, archaeological, and linguistic, forms an unshakable foundation. It tells us that the chants were not just stories, they were navigational logs. The star paths were not just poetry, they were precise directions. The voyages were not accidents of fate, they were the deliberate, skillful acts of a people who knew exactly what they were doing, and science, in its own language, now agrees. The true map of the Pacific was never drawn on parchment. It existed as a living dialogue between a human mind and the moving world, a cognitive architecture built from memory, sensation, and story. This represents far more than a collection of clever techniques. It is a fundamentally different way of knowing space itself. In the Western tradition that shaped modern navigation, the map is an object. It is separate from the landscape it represents, a reduced, abstract model you carry with you. You consult it, you plot your position upon it, and you move across a terrain that is distinct from the paper in your hand. The map's authority is in its fixed accuracy, its ability to represent the world from a detached, God's eye view. The Polynesian wayfinder operated from the opposite principle. For them, the map was not something you carried, it was something you performed. It lived in the continuous act of observation and synthesis, in the feel of the swell under the hull, in the memory of a star's rising point, in the chant that linked a cloud pattern to a specific island's lee. The map was dynamic, updating with every shift in the wind, every new bird sighting, every passing hour of the sun. Its authority came not from detachment, but from profound immersion. You did not look down at the map to see where you were. You listened to the environment tell you where you were because you were part of the map itself. This is a holistic form of environmental intelligence that modern society has largely traded away for the convenience of the external object. We gain pinpoint precision with our satellite coordinates, but we lose the deep, felt connection that comes from knowing a place through all our senses, from having its rhythms written into our own. The navigator's mind became a perfect instrument of integration, weaving together data from the heavens, the ocean depths, the air, and animal behavior into a single, coherent understanding of place. There was no distinction between the scientific and the sacred, the practical and the poetic, because all knowledge flowed from and back into the living world. This cognitive map fostered a relationship with the ocean that was not one of conquest but of conversation. You did not blast through the waves, you listened to them. You did not impose a grid upon the stars, you joined their ancient dance. This way of knowing cultivated a humility and an attentiveness that are perhaps the greatest navigational tools of all, reminding us that to truly know where you are, you must first remember how to listen. Their legacy is a map written in the mind, a science of belonging. The early navigators of the Pacific did not simply cross an empty expanse, they engaged in a continuous, intimate conversation with it. Theirs was a complete and self-consistent system, where every star, every swell, every bird and cloud was a meaningful character in a story of place. This was not primitive guesswork, but a sophisticated environmental intelligence, a way of knowing that wove observation, memory, and myth into a reliable guide for the greatest journeys in human history. The true destination of these voyages was not just new land, but a profound understanding of humanity's place within a living world. The modern revival of this knowledge, sparked by the voyage of Hōkūleʻa and the teachings of masters like Piailug, represents something far deeper than historical curiosity. It is a powerful reclamation of identity. For Polynesian communities, it is the joyful and defiant act of remembering who they are and how their ancestors saw the universe. It stitches a cultural fabric torn by time and outside forces back together with threads of starlight and ocean spray. For all of us, it stands as a breathtaking testament to human ingenuity, a reminder that brilliance is not defined by the complexity of our tools, but by the depth of our relationship with the world around us. This story invites a quiet reflection. It asks us to look beyond the dominant, often Western, paradigms of knowledge that prioritize the written, the quantified, and the detached. There are other ways to know, other maps to be drawn in breath and memory and shared story. The living legacy of this voyaging science continues today through the work of the Polynesian Voyaging Society and the worldwide ohana, or family, of traditional sailors it has inspired. Their ongoing journeys are not reenactments, but a living practice, a way of carrying ancient wisdom into a modern future, teaching a new generation to navigate not just the sea, but their own path with the same reverence, awareness, and courage.